Hello, everyone. I'm Melory Johnson, 25-year beauty veteran, consultant, and strategist. Welcome to Pretty Equity, where we tackle the real issues facing beauty founders and investors and bring you the answers from the experts behind the deals. Most beauty brands don't fail because their product is bad. They fail because the strategy behind it is weak. A great product can get someone's attention, but only a great brand can keep it. And that's where strategy is everything. So today, joining me to discuss it all is Andranik Ayvazyan. I hope I pronounced that right. A strategist who helps beauty brands clarify who they are, what they stand for, and how to build marketing that creates real equity. Today, we're unpacking what makes a great brand memorable, investable, and scalable long after the launch hype fades. Antonik, thank you for being here. I
Thank you
think
so
it's
much,
safe
Megan.
to say you'd agree that although beauty is emotional, brand success is strategic. Just to clarify for viewers, brand strategy defines who you are and why you exist. Marketing is how that strategy gets expressed into the market. Confusing the two is one of the most expensive mistakes I see. With that said, one thing I also see repeatedly is brands jumping straight into execution without this foundational clarity. In fact, even from an investor's point of view, they often assume that a great product will automatically equal a great brand. But Andronik, you and I both know that that's not always the case. So for a new to beauty founder, how would you explain what brand strategy actually is? And why does it matter before anything is actually produced?
Thank you so much, Melory. First of all, thanks for having me here. It's a very interesting experience to be talking to you about this. You know what? I'm not always talking about the brand strategy, but in this case, we're asking very important questions, right? Many founders, they start their businesses thinking, you know what? I've got this brilliant product idea. There is a formulation behind, or I've got a cool packaging, or I'm a sustainable whatever, and they think this is the strategy of their company, right? In the end of the day, a cool product, a good formulation, a good this or that is just one aspect of building a brand, right? It's like what and whether you take the route to market, you take the formulation, you take the financials, X, Y, Z, you need to make sure that you build a brand rather than just a small idea within the universe of beauty, right? And what's also important, I'm talking sometimes about brand strategies, but in the end of the day, the brand strategy is in the end, the company strategy. What many brand founders or many beauty founders get wrong, unfortunately, they think bringing a product to the market, which can be the best performing product, can have the best design, can have the best XYZ, can have the best clinicals, the best tests, the best, you name it. But in the end, they cannot execute their strategy. You're just talking about the execution, right? And they cannot execute the strategy because they don't have one. They just bring a product to the market and they don't know what to do next. And I think this is a big issue. And in the end, not only the brand fails, but their whole company fails. And yes, beauty is emotional, but running a company cannot be emotional. It needs to be structural. Yeah, that's that. I mean, I'm not sure if I confused you, Mallory, or not, but I think this is a foundational thought.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's the whole point, is that strategy should be the foundation, not the idea or the
Yeah.
formula. So let's just looking at foundation and looking at the soul of a brand.
Mhm.
Okay. How do you help founders define their brand's identity? Because a brand's identity is its voice, its mission, its
Mhm.
consumer promise, its raison d'être. So
Mhm.
it's beyond, all of this is beyond formula, right?
Mhm.
And by the way, for anyone watching who thinks brand strategy feels intangible, this is exactly where some of the most measurable decisions are made. So, Andronik, I don't know if you want to go ahead and react to that.
Yeah, I think, the thing is, many founders come to me once they've already have this voice, they know what they stand for and everything, right? So I cannot be talking like um how this is being created, but what I know is the beauty world is extremely congested, extremely, right? Because the barrier to enter is so low. I mean, you just go to a contract manufacturer, you order 100 creams or 100 shampoos or 100 whatever, body gels or shower gels, and you're there. You have the best product. You think you have the best product, by the way. But if in case you do this without creating this reason of existence, what the positioning of your brand is in the beauty universe, there is a zero chance. I'm not talking about the 1%. There's a zero chance you can scale up. Yeah, in case you are somewhere, I know you live in the States, and in case you're somewhere in like in one of the states in the US in a small town, and you can be selling these products to a small shop next door, right? Or to three shops, to five shops, and it stops there because you can't be scaling up the brand just because of your own personal involvement. You need to scale a brand because it has a right to exist, right? And many founders forget this. They're too much around like specifics, the pack. Again, I don't want to be repeating myself, but it's the same story every time.
No, absolutely. I mean, 100%. And so if you were to say put on an investor hat for a moment,
Mhm.
what early signal would tell you whether a brand has a strong foundation or absolutely no identity at all?
The thing is,
Actually, from an investor standpoint, yeah, you know what? Go ahead and react to that, and I'll come to my second thought.
what's important, I think, in from the investor's perspective about the identity. I don't want to be talking about visual identity and everything. These are all cool things, and one investor likes one identity, the other one doesn't like that identity and everything, right? But I think in the current market, and I always tell this, and I had a post on LinkedIn about this a couple of months ago, that you should stop creating beauty products. Yes, but honestly, this was the post that it went viral. So, but if you do, you need to pay attention to certain details, right? I don't remember exactly all the points I put there because I just don't remember. But um, I think the key thing is, are you differentiating enough? Are you bringing something else to the market? Are you creating a brand or just a single use product? Are you, is your brand defensible? Like, can a competitor just copy your packaging, copy the formulas? Because of course, if you talk about the efficacy and everything, if you go to a good lab or you have a good scientist, almost everything can be reverse engineered, right? So like what's the point of having the best formula and then after 2 months it's not the best formula anymore, right? And I think this is the foundation once again of whether the brand has a reason to exist or not, whether it has this identity or not. Because I think for me, the identity is also the reason to exist. Are you different than anything else? And yes, within a brand, you can have, and then within the brand, you can have good SKUs, bad SKUs, good products, bad products, but you need to create something as a brand, as a foundation. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And from that same investor standpoint, what you
Hmm.
described has real implications. And what I mean by that is weak brand strategy can show up later, right? High
Hmm.
CAC, inconsistent messaging, poor retail performance, short-lived growth.
Hmm.
Because, everything about a brand is your story, your positioning, and that's what makes you competitive. Because to your
Hmm.
point exactly, you're you're not going to be the only fish in this ocean. This is a saturated market. And for
Hmm.
people who are thinking that they're coming in because they've got the next best thing, guess what? Everybody thinks they have the next best thing.
Everybody thinks they got the next best thing. Everybody. I haven't seen any founder, honestly, any founder, any company that I'm talking to, like I'm talking to lots of people, right? I haven't seen anybody who says, you know what, I just got a regular product and I'm just making some margin. I'm making some money with it and I pay my bills. Like everybody says, I'm building like road of the future. Like everybody's referring to this. Yeah.
No, I mean it's completely true. And I mean one of the things is market fit. And if we could build a little on that and talk about how this plays out in the market.
Hmm.
When you take on a new brand, you know what I mean, again with your investor hat on, What do you look for to ensure that story and positioning actually align with real consumer need? Because again, to your point, everybody comes with, oh, I have the next best thing. But at what point in time is this something that is actually what consumers need?
I think it really depends on the stage of the business, right? So in case you talk to someone who's a pre-seed stage, it's very difficult to answer this question. You don't know, right? The only thing you can say is certain categories are more saturated than the others. So most probably in the non-saturated ones, you have more chances. That's it, right? When you go for companies that already have a certain revenue, $1 million, $2 million, $5 million, $10 million, then answering this question is much easier because then you know consumer is reacting to it, consumer needs it or not. What's also difficult though, in case you are a local brand from a state in the United States, or if you are a British brand or from Australia or something, the first 1 million, 2, 3 million revenue outside of the D2C channel are also person related, right? So it can be that you have a good contact in CVS, you go to this good contact, they put it on the shelf. With a good or a bad sellout, it sells a bit, right? And then you go to an investor, say, oh, by the way, I got a listing in 1,000 CVS stores, right? This also happens, even though it doesn't happen quite often because then CVS are also not stupid to do this, right? But it can also happen that's why I think the maturity of the brand or the level, like the life cycle of the brand is extremely important to answer this question. So in the pre-seed or pre-revenue, it's extremely important to see how saturated the segment is and can they really offer something, right? In case you're gonna create just a regular shampoo, who cares about it, right? Like who cares about it? Unless you are so vertically integrated, you have your own manufacturing, like you go very like you go very deep either on science or you go very deep on the pricing or you have an aggressive positioning. In the end, you need to execute. Otherwise, it's just you'll lose all your money while you build this brand,
So, Andranik,
as all the
where do you
investors
think
say.
story comes into this? Because, we're always hearing, and you see it on LinkedIn all the time, there's posts about it ad nauseum about how you have to have a story and authenticity, and that's how you set yourself apart. But, once your positioning has become clear, execution becomes easier because it makes it harder to fake, right? But
Mhm.
like to your point, not everyone understands their position. Like who
Mhm.
are they at their source? So how much does a story have to play
I
in
think
this?
story is extremely important. Whether the story is becoming an important decision-making factor for a consumer after 3, 4 years of existence of a brand, I don't know anymore. With some brands, whether it's Patagonia or something else, most probably it lives throughout generations, right? If you talk about beauty, like you don't know all the beauty company stories, right? You know them in the first years of their existence once they get popular because that's also a certain hook to get clients in. But in the end of the day, beauty products, they normally need to offer some efficiency. Of course, there is this part of community building around the story and everything. So story is a must because otherwise you are selling a packaging with a nice formula in it. Like without story, you can't build a brand. But at the same time, I think within the beauty, the longer the brand exists, the less relevant the story becomes. What's more important is the real community that's been built around it, and then the real efficacy of the product, because otherwise it doesn't make any sense.
No, absolutely. I mean, and you mentioned Patagonia. That's a great example. But can we just look at case insights for a second here? Um, I want to delve into some of the cases for viewer insight from your past experiences. And I don't know whether or not you can talk to this, but can you share an example of where strong strategy made all the difference in the brand's success? You don't have to mention the brand if you don't want to, whatever you're
Mhm.
comfortable with. But I want to emphasize for viewer insight, how strong strategy can be the make or break for a brand.
Yeah, I think I can't say any names unfortunately, but I think some of the key things is we can't generalize strategy, right? We can't say this is a strategic move or whatever. But what strategy can also mean are certain parts of the strategy, right? If you talk to go to market, route to market, positioning, distribution, or whatever, many brands, when they launch, they think, you know what, I'm going to be selling here, I'm going to be selling there. Then they go to every small store, they do D2C, they do this, they do that. But I've seen also examples when certain very big brands, you know, of them, most probably, I mean, 100% you know of them, have decided to be very like peculiar in their approach to distribution, to the countries of distribution, to the channel of distribution, to build the brand equity, to make this as the basis, and then go further in terms of like further traction and everything, right? And I think like strategy can be in anything, in your positioning, in your to market strategy, in the way you spend money on your D2C acquisitions, whatever. But I think without it, just going around everywhere, it's not only wasting your time, but it's also like wasting your investors' resources if you got any investors in. So I think you need to be very, very structured in your approach. And one of the easiest examples is just distribution, where you go, with which margins you go, what discounts you give, do you do promotions, you don't do promotions, like do you participate in, I don't know, like in Black Fridays, you don't. I'm just giving you some random examples, right? But I think they're extremely important. And you need to know this before you start doing it because your whole financial model needs to depend on this. So you can't be planning to have no promotions or no distribution in a foreign country, and then you start doing it because your whole financial model will be just different. You won't be making money,
Mhm.
or if you're lucky, you will, but most of the cases not.
No, no, I mean 100%. And just making a little pivot here, you were speaking a little bit about mistakes, right?
Hmm.
So, what mistake that you've seen in your experiences most stands out to you? Because common mistakes that people will make are things like not deciding the strategy in advance. And one of the things that you had mentioned now was like let's talk about discounts and Black Fridays and that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
If you want to set yourself up as a brand, right? There are some brands that don't ever discount. Okay.
Hmm.
Take some of the legacy brands like Chanel. Forget about
Hmm.
it. You're never going to see Chanel go on a, a
Hmm.
sale ever.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Because that's their brand. That is who they are. They're the ultimate of luxury, and luxury
Hmm.
doesn't go on sale. But they know that because that's their soul. That's their raison d'être,
Hmm.
right? But you'll see that brands make mistakes, begin because they're not understanding strategy.
Hmm.
Um, and why does that usually lead to short-lived hype instead of lasting equity? Talking about these mistakes.
Yeah, you know what? I think the biggest mistake I see is not even so much about the strategic choices of making discounts or not, but it's like the biggest mistakes are about managing the business in the wrong way, right? And the biggest, by far, the biggest mistake I see is that people are mismanaging their funds, especially from their investors, right? So um, the hype, there's an external hype when you create hype around your product, but there's also an internal hype, right? So I've just created a brand. I'm a pre-seed company. I've just raised 1 million on a 5 million valuation. I've got the funds in, so let's go spend it. I'm not generating enough traction. I'm not getting enough listings. I'm not generating enough revenue. In 6 months, I'm going bankrupt. So these are the biggest mistakes I see because these mistakes, you cannot correct them. Some of the strategic mistakes you can still correct them, right? You will decide to go to a country, then you'll shut it down, you'll go to another country, right? So talking about mistakes, the biggest mistakes you can have are not only the mistakes of managing a brand, are managing the company. And this is, I think, very much this is being forgotten very often, right? So in case of discounts and everything, this really depends on your brand. And to be honest, I really don't know whether when Chanel was launched decades ago, whether they ever did discounts. I don't know. Maybe they did. I really don't know. Maybe they did. Maybe they didn't. I know that even watch brands. I'm a watch enthusiast. I'm not sure if you knew this or not, but I'm following the market quite a lot. I'm a watch lover. Like 7 8 years ago, pre-COVID, you could go to a Rolex dealer and get a discount on your Rolex. Nobody would imagine this. Now Rolex, like, and now you barely get any, first of all, right? And then you will never get a discount, or I don't even know about anybody getting a discount in the last 3 4 years from a Rolex dealer, right? Or in the last 5 years. So I think even this can change. You can start a brand where you do discounts and then you don't, then you can start without discounts and then you start doing, depending on your market strategy. But in the end of the day, you need to have this strategy. You cannot be just doing one morning one thing and the evening another thing. I think you need to be consistent with what you decided to do, because this consistency is also extremely important for the people around you and primarily your investors, not only in the round where you got investments, but also in the upcoming rounds.
No, 100%. I mean, inconsistency becomes expensive. I
Yeah.
mean, just, I'll leave it at that. But let's just pivot for a sec. I want to talk about launching and launch strategy because again, there's also a strategy to a launch,
Mhm.
you know. And you and I both know that launch is just a moment, okay?
Mhm.
But brand is a commitment, if we understand
Mhm.
the term launch.
Mhm.
So when you build a go-to-market plan for beauty brands,
Mhm.
what are the non-negotiables? In other words, the absolute must-haves that need to be in place before launch. So talking from a launch strategy.
Yeah. You know what? I'm not a big fan of launches because I think launch is just a single point of
Mhm.
contact of a consumer with the brand. There's just that day, right? So at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. But what you need to do in case you're gonna go online or offline or whatever are all the details, right? Whether operationally you're equipped for this, right? So I think very often brands forget the operations, which are non-negotiable, right? Is your inventory in proper condition? Is your Shopify working well? Do you have enough stock to send to your retailers? Are you doing enough activations? Do you have the sales rep sitting in CVS or Sephora or somewhere else, right? So I think these are the key things. So I'm not a person who goes too much around the launch as a single point of contact. But if so, a launch needs to happen for your brand, and I'm very much in favor of executing it operationally, like spotless. That's what's most important because in case you have operational issues, then the chance of your consumer getting in touch with your brand in a proper way is just limited. You're just wasting money.
No, 100%.
Yeah.
And look, I mean, Andranik, not for a conversation today, but later on, if we do this again, I'd love to have a conversation with you about, contract manufacturing, particularly and
Yeah.
scalability. Because
Yeah.
again, to your point, if you don't understand and it's good to go back to our conversation about mistakes and about, spending money in the wrong places. If you don't understand how to choose a CM, if you don't understand what to look for, and,
Mhm.
I have spoken to other people about this. So for the viewers, you can go onto my channel and take a look at some of the other interviews I've had
Mhm.
regarding contract manufacturing and quality specifically. But, again, like I said, that would be a conversation for another day.
Mhm.
But these are the kinds of things that founders and investors need to be aware of. Just because you can make something great in a lab and you absolutely loved, what I mean, your sample or your prototype, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's scalable. There's a million things that can go wrong, including
100%.
and particularly back to the topic of launching, particularly if you're looking at B&M, if you're going into brick and mortar, you know what I mean, and you've taken the time and you have managed to get a yes from a Sephora, for example. I mean, you understand that that's a big deal. To be able to get in front of them, stand in front of them, be able to sell your concept to them, they say yes to you. Now the pressure is on to be able to maintain that relationship with Sephora. And what does that mean? Because you're
Mhm.
not getting a second chance. There are way
Mhm.
too many other people in that
Yeah.
line.
You know, it's very interesting you're saying this. I had a post about what happens in your life after you get delisted at Sephora. I mean, once you get a chance, Mallory, have a look at this post. So, I mean, like we have so many posts around the same things, right? And I think it's critical because your cash management, your cash position, your contract manufacturer, your warehouse, and everything, they all need to be equipped for this launch because otherwise you'll fail. Of course, if you are an experienced founder, this is not your first startup, not your first brand, maybe you worked for a couple of strategics and everything, or you worked for a CM, or you worked in a smaller brand who had a CM already. You know that creating a formula on a lab scale or in a production scale are two different things that you need to go through the scale up procedure because maybe even things like instabilities in your formula can happen. I don't know, like your packaging goes wrong, everything can happen. And I think you have just one chance to get it right, and you just need to get it right. So that's why, for me, the successful launch is not only like what kind of message you communicate to your consumer, what kind of post you have on Instagram or TikTok, right? But like, is your backbone secure? Is your foundation strong enough? As a business, I'm not talking about as a brand only, right? As a business.
No, well, I
Yeah.
mean, all of that is part of the strategy. All of that
Yeah.
is part of how you. you go from being just an idea to being a brand.
Yeah.
All of this is these are moving parts, and there are a lot of pieces in this machine, cogs
Mhm.
in this machine. So from an investor's point of view, when you're evaluating a brand, what marketing or brand signals beyond you'd mentioned, Instagram and social media. So beyond your follow account and viral moments, what are the brand signals that an investor should be looking for if they're going to decide to put money behind a brand?
Again, it depends really on the stage of investment, right, Mallory? In every stage is different. But I think the relevance of your brand, the relevance of the category you're playing in, how big the category is, all this fancy words like time, SAM, and everything like the total addressable market, serviceable markets, obtainable markets. I think these are critical things to understand. So it's not only about the social media account. If your social media account, like you have like 10 million followers, and in the end, like you can't engage with them, like who cares, right? Like, is what you're proposing to the market interesting enough? And you know what the thing is? Many people also forget about this. And coming back to this launch question, right? People think when you get listed in a retailer, it's a done deal.
Mm.
Of course, the retailer will buy six packs of a product per store, and then there are 1,000 stores, and then you will sell 6,000 of each product, and then you have five SKUs. You'll sell 30,000 pieces for each costing $3, and you made $100,000 of revenue, and then nothing. So if you can't generate the sellout, if you cannot generate replenishment orders, it's done deal. You'll just kicked off of the shelf. They will return you all your inventory. You will just go into bankruptcy, right? So this is why I'm saying if you are in a pre-stage, it's different KPIs that you need to assess. If you are already like on the market, you've already gone through three, four cycles of replenishment orders with the retailers, then the assessment by an investor is very different.
Yeah. But one thing we'd spoken about earlier was consistency.
Hmm.
And we'd spoken about consistency, and consistency isn't just something that is important when, you're building your brand, from in terms of scalability, in terms of quality, in terms of all of those things. And, I'm not even going to get into compliance regulation. That's another story. But let's just talk about messaging for a second here, because again, this is part of branding.
Hmm.
Messaging consistency. There's a reason people use the old cliche,
Hmm.
consistency is key. But
Hmm.
not everyone considers that messaging consistency needs to reach beyond just words. All right.
Hmm.
So it's not just what we're saying. So with that said, how do you create alignment so that packaging, claims, retail presence, digital marketing all tell the same story and reinforce the same value? So in other words, this is consistency in messaging, but it's beyond just the words that you say.
I think I cannot answer this question in a proper way, Mallory, honestly, because I think if you are a good brand builder, if you are a good founder, you understand your own branding, then you by default understand your consistent message, right? And those are not only the words. These are visuals, these are all the assets, this is your tone of voice, these are the posts, these are your shelf displays, this is I don't like the interviews you give to other people, right? So you need to fill your own brand, and whatever is outside of this consistent image of your brand, you shouldn't be just doing it. That's it. So anything you do about out of it, even for making a quick buck, this kills your business long term. That's it. So I mean, I cannot be giving a very detailed answer like how to deal with it and everything, but I think any brand builder, and most of the brands I've come across are either built by more brand people or lab people. At least that's in my experience, right? I haven't seen a supply chain guy trying to build a beauty brand. I've never seen this, right? Or a pure finance guy. The finance guy could be in combination with a brand person, anyways. But this brand people, this is the first thing they need to concentrate around, right? What is this? What does this brand stand for? Packaging, secondary packaging, displays, messaging, assets, visuals, letter types. I don't know. Yeah.
No, 100%. I mean, all of this has to do with relevancy. But let's just stay on the topic of relevance for a second.
Mhm.
So once the launch and the excitement of the launch and all the rest of that is out of the way and it fades, um, staying relevant becomes the real challenge, right? So, from your perspective, what actually keeps a beauty brand relevant over time? In other words, once the launch excitement fades, what drives the long-term relevance? And I know we've spoken about messaging and I know we've spoken about consistency, and these are all themes. But, from your experiences, what have you seen that drives this long-term relevance?
Yeah, you need to you need to state engagement with your public, right? So I think in the current setting, having a portfolio of products and just bringing like having the same portfolio for 10 years, like it's not gonna work, especially in such a fast-moving market like beauty, right? Some of the points are like coming with more NPDs, coming with new things, coming with renovated formulas, coming with XYZ, right? Doing co-partnerships. And I think these are really, really key things of staying relevant. And in the end of the day, which we forget quite often, by the way, just bringing good quality products to the market.
Mm, mm,
And with good quality, I don't only mean that you have a good performing scalp treatment product or a good performing hand cream or whatever. Even the packaging, that you have no leakage, that the box looks nice. I mean, it doesn't break. All this kind of things, right? In case you lose all these facets, you just lose your business and then you're not relevant anymore. Then you went through the hype, it went down, it's finished, right?
mm.
And then also, depending on the segment you serve, and that's again part of the strategy that we discussed in the very beginning, if you go all in, and there have been like in the hair care industry, there have been a couple of examples of a very premium positioned brand going into all gas stations and like into all small shops and everything, and then killing their own brand basically with it. Like every consumer, once they pay 50 euros for a shampoo or $50 for a shampoo, they want to have some kind of a special connection with the brand, right? And once the special connection fades, because then the brand is everywhere, then you lose the relevance for these consumers, right? That's also what's being forgotten by many people.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I've seen it. I've seen it when I was on the brand side, where we this particular brand had exclusivity at a Neiman Marcus, Bergdorf Goodman, which was a big deal,
Hmm.
because those types of high-end luxury retailers will take care of you. They will
Hmm.
do everything they can to you know to nurture you, to grow you. They are event-driven stores. But the mistakes that they made were just endless. They
Hmm.
didn't take scalability into consideration. They
100%.
got they got too greedy. They wanted to be everywhere. So instead of understanding, you know what I mean, to your point, who they now were as a brand, they wanted to also be in Bloomingdale's and also be in Macy's and also be in Saks Fifth Avenue and also be in Sephora and also, and then you got your, the person who opened their arms to you first, the Neiman Marcus, who's now saying, "Whoa," you know what I mean? You know what I mean?
But
I
this
thought
happens
that.
quite often, by the way. And then, it also again depends on your cap table, right? Like who is involved in your business. If you have very aggressive, like private equity people, and they need to exit the business in a year time, what they'll be doing, they'll be just pushing you in every direction, saying, listen,
Mm,
sell here, sell there. We'll just increase our EBITDA levels and then we cash out on better terms. I think you can't be just like, I can't be generalizing around this, but I think staying true to your strategy is extremely important because otherwise you'll just fade away. That's it. But what we didn't touch upon in the last half an hour of this discussion is the founder effect, right? Who the founder is, right? If the founder is a hardworking person with a vision, with a strategic mind, with an execution, like hands-on someone, and a very high level of involvement and integrity, then there's a bigger chance for the brand to stay relevant, right? So I think the question of the founders is extremely, extremely important because in the end of the day, um, I'm not sure if we talked about this before or not, but especially in the early stages of a brand, and I'm not talking about a private equity investment in $100 million company, right? I'm talking about like the early stages of a brand. The investors, they invest in a technology, they invest in a brand, how it looks and what the formulation is and whether it got listed in CVS for our Boots or Superdrug in the UK, but they primarily invest in the founder. That's the number one thing, right? Because if you have the best brand, but there's nobody to execute it, and like there's an idiot running it, like you will just lose your money. So the first thing to look at is the founder. Because what can happen if you got a solid founder, and I think this happens in tech business even more than in beauty business or in consumer goods, then the founder will be brave enough to pivot, change the direction, do something else, change the packaging, change the strategy. And I think this is sometimes what you've planned in the beginning just doesn't work. But in case you are brave enough to understand this early enough, then you have a bigger chance of succeeding.
Okay. You know what?
Yeah.
And I'm glad you actually brought that up because, the last question I'm going to throw at you before we close up here, um, is to founders, to strengthen their brand strategy for 2026. Um, you know, we spoke about what the investors should look like, and we spoke about the founders themselves. And you touched on the ability to to be elastic, to be open-minded enough that you're not so, bought in on your thinking and your way that if your founder realizes, hey, listen, we need a pivot, can they pivot? So if you were talking to the founder themselves, you're the investor, you're saying, I'm going to invest in you, but here's what I need you to know. What would that one thing be? Just
Be a business manager rather than a brand manager. Business
okay.
first, brand second, and then all the rest. Because in the end of the day, the investors are not putting money in a brand, they are putting money in a business. Yeah. So I think, and this is also being forgotten very often, and I think I said this in the beginning of the conversation, right? So the biggest thing I can tell the founders is make sure you are not a brand manager or a marketing manager or a CMO, right? Or a business manager, and there's a very big difference in it. That's the main thing.
Absolutely. 100%. And so to viewers, as you just heard, great branding isn't an aesthetic, it's a decision-making system. It's how a beauty brand stays consistent, credible, and relevant as it grows. Andranik, thank you for showing us how clarity and strategy transform a product into a brand consumers trust and investors can believe in. For those watching or
Pleasure.
listening, if this episode changed how you think about building or funding beauty brands, follow me on LinkedIn for more expert insights on the issues and answers that drive smarter beauty investment. I'm Melory Johnson. See you next time.